Hello, cannabis traders and investors. It's time once again to check in on the charts and see where we stand bigger picture, as we've seen a lot of volatility in the broader market over the last couple of months. We've seen a lot of pain in the sector. Everybody wants to know when there's going to be a bottom and a longer term cycle shift. There's some looming fundamental catalysts that are poking around, but in the end, it comes down to the charts for me, and I'll show you what I need to see to have confidence in a bottom. So we're going to look at the Canadian sector, the US sector, and then we'll do some bonus psychedelic sector at the end. Some headlines this week. We've got the SAFE Act passing through the House 6 times now, being tacked on to the America Competes bill. It got approved to go to the Senate to be voted on. Then you got Schumer saying he is going to put forward in April some legalization legislation. And you've got Schumer potentially going to slap down the America Competes Act, or at least the fact that SAFE is being added to it. We'll have to see. That's certainly what the pattern has been. A lot of people are sick of Schumer, myself included. Just stop talking. Just do something. Talk, 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 talk. Welcome to US politics. So I don't keep, that's pretty much as close an eye as I'm keeping on the fundamentals right now. And there are times where I pay more attention to the fundamentals, but every decision I'm making based on trading is based on the charts and based on prices. And that has saved me a lot of money over the last 8 months. I've made a few attempts to make bullish entries in this sector over the last 3 or 4 months. Some of them with small wins. The big spike that we saw back in November gave small wins, some with small losses, some break-even attempts. Pretty much the sector for me has been a non-event for the last bunch of months. But there are times where the fundamentals do play a more significant role in establishing my trade game plans. And I already know heading into November of 2022 that that's going to be the case. So end of summer, I'm going to start scouting to grab positions, knowing that there will likely be a run up, just because I've seen it year after year over the last 11 years playing the sector. When there are votes, where there's individual states that are going to be legalizing and legalizing medical, the media gets on top of it. And generally we see a little bit of a run up into that. So I know that I'm going to be looking for that little dangling carrot. In November, I'm going to try and establish some positions based on that fundamental aspect of things late in the summer. But for now, I currently have some of the largest positions in the sector that I have had since that last big pop that we saw on that little very mini and short-lived short squeeze. It's a nice 40%, but very short-lived. And that was back in November. So why am I now in the largest position that I've been in a long time? Well, we can't talk about the sector without talking about the broader market and the impact. And over the last however many months, there were many times where I would say, the sector is beat up, but the market's at all-time highs. And any pullback that we see in the broader market right now, the sector is not positioned well at all to withstand any kind of weakness. And so now we've got that weakness in the broader market to start this year. And that really crushed things down and flushed things out a little bit and cooled things off bigger picture in the broader market. So for me, that makes me more comfortable because, okay, we've seen the weakness, we've cooled things off. And if we can set a fear bottom and head back up to all-time highs, that would be a good entry point for the sector, in my opinion, because it's been so beat up. I'm watching for growth in general, all growth names. And again, when I'm looking at growth, I'm looking at the EV sector. We've got the cannabis space. We've got the biotech sector. IWM is the gauge that I use for growth names in the stock market. And we can see it's been extremely weak since November. So that's now 3 months of weakness. And it's going to be very critical this coming week because the bulls are attempting the first daily trend change. When's the last time IWM set a daily higher low and higher high? Your answer is we had a tiny little weak one up there, but aside from that, we haven't done it since the all-time highs. So if we can hold the low of 188 and break the initial high bounce of 203.90 this coming week, that'll be a daily trend change confirmed to the bulls. And I would anticipate that the cannabis sectors will see benefit from that, and they will go up as well. So that's something we're watching very closely. And a simple statement would be, if IWM is unable to break 203.90 this coming week, I don't expect the cannabis bulls to do much of anything. I don't expect them to go very far at all. So that's a baseline criteria of what I have to see happen if I'm going to continue holding some bullish positions. And again, I jump in and out all the time very quickly, and I have no problem just cutting it all. I'll jump back in some other time. I know a lot of people who aren't full-time traders or aren't used to trading, they have a real hard time exiting because they don't know when they're going to get back in, and they don't have the confidence of being able to determine when they're going to get back in. But once you've done it 1,000 times over a decade, it's very simple to get out and get back in. And sometimes I get back in a little bit higher. But if I have new information, then that's something I'm willing to do. So IWM we're watching close, SPY we're watching close. It was a great bounce, from the all-time high to the fear low. We bounced over 60%, not a gain from the bottom, but we retraced 60% of the drop down. And I would not be surprised to see the broader market trade within this range that we established for the majority of February. So we can trade around within this tightening range for a while, and just keeping that in mind as well. This past week, we saw 2 days, where the cannabis names stood out as lead bull sectors. And over the last 8 months, that has not happened often at all. And it's short-lived. It's the kind of thing, it's what I call a bullish correlation, when you see action in the stock market and you see the sector outperforming and showing more strength than IWM or than SPY. And it happened twice. It happened, let's see, the first time it happened was, I forget exactly which day, whether it was Monday or Tuesday. I believe it was Monday. CGC had that big green day. And on Monday here, well, it was big and green in the broader market as well. It's either Monday or Tuesday where it stood out clearly that cannabis was stronger than the broader market. Then we saw a bit of weakness, relative weakness again, as we pulled back with 2 solid red days. And you can see it's SPY didn't have 2 solid red days, but IWM did. So it's IWM that we want to be watching. If we're only watching one name, it's IWM. And we then saw, again today, sector standing out with relative strength. And I'm also keeping an eye on the crypto space because crypto and cannabis, in my opinion, go hand in hand as far as being risk-on assets. And to see both crypto, here's my watch list on crypto on the right here, big green day in crypto. And again, cannabis names green as well. So what we have to see is continued bullish correlations. The more the better, multiple days in a row where that just shows buying pressure specific to the sector that is causing it to be more bullish than the broader market. So starting off with Canadian MJ, we have a couple names in daily uptrends already and other names that are not. So I'm looking at CGC here, and earnings this week for CGC are going to dictate a lot for Canadian MJ, a lot less for US MJ. US MJ may react, but it'll be a much more muted reaction in my opinion. And again, it's because US MJ is traded on the OTC. There's less automated trading systems in terms of correlations. You've got bots that are trading on the NASDAQ and the NYSE, where if CGC goes up a percent, there's automatic buying that takes place. You program a bot that says, if CGC does this, buy TLRY at this price. And they're constantly interacting with each other. And that doesn't really happen cross NASDAQ to OTC. You have individual humans that are doing it, but it's not the same automated trading environment. So what I mean by that is we're going to see CGC react to earnings, and we're going to see all of its Canadian peers that are higher listed are going to react similarly. So if CGC goes up 10%, its peers are going to go up 6-7%. And if CGC goes down 10%, its peers are going to dump as well. So keeping that in mind, we know that that's the most important thing this coming week for the Canadian MJ names. CGC at this point has changed the daily trend. This was a bounce to a lower high. We held support for a higher low, and there's your higher high. And it happened on a little bit of increasing bull volume. Bulls always want increasing bull volume. Bears always want declining bear volume on consolidation. So we had a little uptick in bull volume. This previous consolidation, little downtick in volume. It was declining. Okay, good sign. If the bulls are going to continue this uptrend, and again, right now we've got a low, lower high, higher low, higher high. We're in an uptrend, trying for another higher low. Got to see another higher high to keep this uptrend going. So bulls are hoping that 752 is our new daily higher low, and we need to break 865 to continue this uptrend. If the low of today breaks on Monday, that's a red flag because all the work that the bulls did today is just erased, just like that. And we did get back some of those gains on the morning. Didn't really get a whole lot of follow through. So bulls have proving to do both on IWM. We need that daily trend change. and on the sector as well. And again, you can see how correlated it is. You just got 3 bounce days, 2 consolidation days, trying for a higher low. And CGC has 3 bounce days, 2 consolidation days, trying for the higher low. So definitely correlated. I am also, as soon as you change the daily trend bullish, I zoom out on the weekly. One time frame at a time. And I say, okay, we've been in a weekly downtrend on CGC since we topped out February 2021. Man, that year seems like 3 years ago, but it was 1 year ago. And it has been a weekly downtrend ever since. So we had a big bounce and we failed to confirm any kind of trend change. On this current bounce, I would consider anything under 1596 as a weekly lower high. What these bulls have to do is see a big enough bounce, then we top out and we have to hold the low and confirm the trend change. Just like we did on the daily, that has to happen on the weekly. And because every candle is an entire week, it takes a long time to play out. So this bounce currently is not nearly big enough to create the space for a weekly trend change to try and take place. So we pretty much must see a bullish earnings reaction if that's going to try and shape up. So I would need to see these bulls, bullish reaction, make their way up to $10. Then we'd say, okay, that's big enough where it's possible that when we top out, we can potentially change the trend. Going back here to this November spike, I would have expected that to have gotten more follow through. And I was surprised at how quickly that move was erased. And I'm talking both Canada and US. That is definitely very notable. Fortunately, the bull move was big enough to position for, if you asked me, are we going to have, is the low set for a while? I would have said yes, and I would have been wrong, but I was able to profit because I was putting my stop losses in places where there were red flags that were given. The fact that we never set a daily high or low on CGC here was obviously a huge red flag. We needed to set a higher low and a higher high, and we didn't. We bounced and gave it all back. So long story short, need daily uptrend continuation to create the space so that when the daily uptrend is lost, we set a weekly high or low and try and change the longer term time frame. So it's real important for the sector bulls to have a bullish reaction to earnings for CGC. Cron is another name that changed the daily trend already. Low, lower high, higher low, higher high. And just like CGC is doing the exact same thing, trying to set a higher low at 343 and must break 388 to continue this uptrend. We zoom out to the weekly. I would call anything under 679 a weekly lower high. And we need a lot more bounce follow through to try and set up the weekly trend change. So as long as this red line here is weekly EMA 12 resistance, and a simple statement is if we're under weekly EMA 12, the bears have complete control still. It's not a big enough bounce to see a trend change attempt. Other names in the sector, my dog is snoring in the background. Other names in the sector have a lot more work to do. ACB came from the low, lower high, and is now trying the higher low. We haven't changed the daily trend yet. Bulls have proven nothing. Looks like we've got earnings here on CGC next week, next Thursday, or ACB next Thursday. So CGC first, ACB second. Bulls must confirm the daily trend change, and to do so, we have to break 456. A simple statement is, if ACB does not break 456 resistance, the bulls don't prove a thing. TLRY, same deal. Trying to set the daily high or low. If we do not break 636, the bulls don't prove a thing. If we do, we confirm a daily trend change, and we zoom out to scout a weekly lower high. And VFF is the same deal. Need that trend change. Has not happened yet. Must break 544. If we do not break the highs of this week, next week, these names aren't going to confirm their daily trend changes. The burden of proof every single step of the way is on the bulls. And when you're in a prolonged downtrend on every time frame, again, it's a long, slow road. You change the daily trend, you zoom out and scout a weekly lower high. You change the weekly trend, you zoom out and you scout a monthly lower high. So it's a long, slow road, and the bulls are just seeing baby step number one to try and change the daily trend. It's notable because the last time CGC has seen a daily higher low and higher high was back here in October. So it has been over 4 months since it has happened. It's now happened again, but earnings are going to dictate whether it sees any follow through or not. And if it's a bearish reaction to earnings, it's just going to be a new weekly lower high, and we're going to be looking right back down at those lows. So that is where we stand in Canadian MJ. I am interested in day trading Canadian MJ names. I sometimes short at resistances. I sometimes go long if there's a big volume spike, because it's a lot easier to market, order, and throw around meaningful dollar volume in these names because they are higher listed, and that is why they often react more than USMJ. The pattern is, if there's any kind of news or any kind of catalyst, Canadian MJ reacts first and goes up first because everybody just throws their money into the liquid names, the liquid trading vehicles, and then the USMJ sector lags behind. And so that's an advantage the traders take advantage of, where, again, when you're in a market where the bots are all linked up, humans don't have much time at all to act on correlations like that. But because we have this barrier between NASDAQ and NYSE and OTC, it allows for a lot of laggard action. And you can, if you see a big green day in Canadian MJ, more often than not, if you go into USMJ names and grab some positions, they show strength after and catch up a little bit. So on to USMJ, and I'll talk a little bit more. I have no Canadian MJ exposure right now. My exposure, let's just get this out of the way, is VRNOF, MSOS, and MNMD. That's my only exposure right now. And again, it's constantly changing. So that is where I stand. IIPR, I want to point out a notable shift. You know, IIPR has been a lead USMJ bull. It's been the teacher's pet, the darling chart. This is what every investor and trader wanted their company to look like between April 2020, COVID bottom, all the way to 2 months ago. And it's the only one that did it. And the fact that it's traded on the NYSE is a factor. The fact that it issues dividends is a factor. You could say its business model not being inhibited as significantly by the federal government is a factor, but a shift has taken place, a notable shift. And recently I pointed out a chart, IIPR divided by MSOS /, and this just shows you comparatively who's outperforming who. If this chart's going up, IIPR is showing a lot more relative strength than MSOS, which it did for a very long time. But the last 2 months, something has shifted. And if you look at the IIPR chart, you can see on the daily time frame, it was right after dividends, the most recent dividends, where this consolidation, there's no red flags to me here. It's just a pullback on a longer term time frame, trying for a monthly high or low, nice bounce. And you can see right after the dividends, there was a big exodus. And then it was obviously broader market weakness added to that as well. But it was almost as if, okay, we got our dividend, sell. I think a lot of people did that based on what this chart is showing us. And again, a major shift where IIPR the last 2 months is seeing notable weakness comparative to MSOS. And you can look at the IIPR chart. I mean, you can look at this chart here comparing the two and say this is a proxy. This is a gauge of probability of access to banking. That's a very simplistic way to break it down. But again, the business model for IIPR benefits from the lack of access to banking from cannabis companies in the US. And MSOS benefits from law changes that allow for access to banking in the US. So you can say that there was zero concern of MSO or of SAFE Act doing anything on this move up. And now it looks like a little bit of a shift is underway. So to me, probabilities are a little bit higher. Just in this chart alone, probabilities are a little bit higher that we may get some kind of action. And the charts that we've been seeing that have been so depressed in the US, the way that I view those charts is pretty much the entire market and the financial world that has money in this sector realizing meet the new boss, same as the old boss, where Biden is not doing anything. It's the same system. And, you know, those of us who've been following the sector and the laws for the last decade plus, it's nothing new, but there was a lot more hope. And the fact that we have the Democrats winning the Senate and the presidency and not a thing changed in an entire year, you're just seeing depression in the sector. Like, oh man, it really is the exact same system and nothing has changed whatsoever. And so again, I look at, I often look at price movements. I had a discussion about COVID way early on as it was just coming to the US. And, all my friends are, oh, this is no big deal. It's just the media trying to scare you. This isn't going to come to the US. And me saying the stock market is telling me that this is a big deal and that this is for real. So there's information. I mean, what better gauge of information than where people are putting their money? People are putting their money where their mouth is as far as what they think is most likely. And the IIPR MSOS chart for me is a gauge of probability for safe or something similar. So the fact that this chart is the weakest it's been in the last 5 weeks, in the last 2 years, is notable to me. And I'm paying attention to it. MSOS. And I know a lot of people, I'm just ranting and going on lots of sidetracks, so appreciate you bearing with me. 20 minutes in already. So a lot of people say safe doesn't matter, and maybe it doesn't big picture, but again, this sector needs a win so bad. Just do something. Do something. And that in itself, we know the uplisting of companies will be significant. It will be very significant. I am one little ant in this game, and I will trade 5 times the dollar volume that I trade right now on these OTC names and even MSOS. You know, if you give me liquidity and an uplisted name, I will throw around 5 times the dollar volume trading this sector or any of these individual names. That's big. That's one little person, and you magnify that by 100,000 or 200,000, and you're starting to talk a massive difference in the market environment. It's very critical for me, in my opinion, that we see that happen. And then you see big money get their run. They did it with TLRY up to 300. You know, big money knows how to run things and knows how to stoke the fires of hype and how to get Twitter and Wall Street bets on board. And that's not going to happen unless you're uplisted. So I know a lot of people look at the fundamentals and say we don't need it, but sector prices need something. So MSOS, why am I in a large position? That's nice volume. Disappointing close. There was definitely a lot more profit taking than the bulls wanted to see. The volume is great. That's the highest volume that we've seen in a very long time. In terms of share count, you know, you look back here and 4 million back here is more dollar volume than 4 million down here. But it's one of the highest volume days that we've seen ever. It's probably in the top 5, which is very notable. We want volume, especially on the green days. But again, at the end of the day, we gave back too much. Tried to get it going with an hourly higher low into the close, but you know, if we closed up at 22.40, it's a much different look than closing down at 22. But still struggling to keep those gains. And look at after hours on the initial move up, we had a high of 22.94, and where did we top out today? 22.92. That's a double top. Might as well call it 23. We have a double top of resistance at $23. So we are in a little, you can call it a daily uptrend, where we had our lower high on the bounce, held support and broke resistance. The reason I am in a large position right now is because my stop level is close by. Every single time I take a trade, I have a stop level because I always want to know, worst case scenario, where am I going to be? I know exactly how much money I'm going to have if I am wrong and I stop out. And that's how I approach every single trade ever. And I learned my lessons big time back when I was trading the cannabis space on the OTC in 2010, 2011. I learned these lessons and I apply them to my trading style now. So I look at this and I say, okay, we set a low yesterday at 2090. And today we held that level at 2105 and we saw bullish action. So yesterday I entered a third of my position, scaling in, anticipating that we're going to form a daily higher low compared to 1965. I saw the strength today and the volume and the potential little catalyst, and I added my second, third, and third positions. So right now I've got an average that's probably, you know, it's nothing great. It's probably 2170 or so. But I know exactly how much I'll lose because if 2090 breaks, I'm out. I'm gone. You have to hold this level to keep me in this position and keep this daily uptrend going. If you fall back down and you lose that support, nope, I've got no allegiance to this sector whatsoever. If it's not going to perform and put money in my pocket, I'm not wasting my time with you. So you must hold, not you, the sector must hold 2090. That is my stop level. I'll give a little bit of wiggle room, but again, I can calculate. I know exactly where I will be, worst case scenario, unless there was some massive gap down with Biden says that we'll never ever legalize anything and it's going back to the dark ages, but very low probability of that. So I know that there is a 99.5% chance of exactly how much I will lose if I am wrong. And I've accepted that risk and I determined my position size based on that risk, and I'm willing to take that risk. because it's a loss that I am very confident that I can make back day trading other names the next week. So that is my MSOS position and my game plan. We zoom out and we know we're just scouting a weekly lower high, anything under 26.50. We need enough follow through to be looking for a setup for an eventual weekly trend change, which again has not happened since all-time highs. There has not been a weekly higher low and higher high since all-time highs. VRNOF, why am I interested here? In my opinion, it's a lead MSO bull, technically speaking, on this chart. Why? Because we have a base of support at, we'll call it $9.86 to $10 that has held time and time and time and time and time and time again. That is a base of support. And there are traders like myself, and there's a lot of us that are just buying if it gets in the low 10s. We'll stop out if 986 breaks, and then we sell when it goes up over 11. And it's just over and over again. You can keep doing that. So if I make an entry at 10.50 and I sell half at $11, my break even is 10. And worst case scenario, I will lose a tiny amount of money. So the position I have in VRNOF is a bit older. I think I've had this position for over a week now. We broke resistance today with no follow through. We must break 11.57 and follow through with this trend change. So I'm doing this as a low, lower high, double bottom, resistance break with no follow through, a new higher low at 10.43. So if I want a closer stop level, I'm still going off 986, but let's say I don't want to risk an extra 5%. I can now use that stop of 10.43. Because again, if there's going to be progress made on this chart, you have to keep setting higher lows. If you cannot set higher lows, you're not going anywhere. So that level must hold next week at 10.43. If it breaks, we must not see any follow through. And we need to get over 11.61 and try and make our way back to 13.94, the last major resistance. Things are getting nice and tight here. We're going to see a volume and volatility spike sometime within the next 2 months, where we've got double bottom, lower high, triple bottom. Anything under 13.94 is just a lower high. And if there's no major catalyst, I'm anticipating a weekly lower high compared to 13.94 is the most likely scenario. And we're going to get real tight, and we're either going to break down to fresh lows and fresh despair, or it's going to break bull and make a move back up towards the upper teens. So this is my other exposure. I probably got 40%. I've got an account that I have specific for psychedelics and MJ, and it's our TCG account, the ChartGuys account. And we took it, the IRS, quick story, IRS sent us a refund that we didn't think we deserved maybe 4 years ago, and went to the accountant and said, I don't think we're supposed to get this back right now. And he said, well, hang on to it, don't spend it, but maybe you can invest it. So, all right, I'll trade with it, and ended up taking that position up something like 700% in the Canadian MJ bull run. So this is now my high risk, high reward account. And it's not mine, it's myself and Jason, my partners, but I do everything with it. And so that's my MJ account. And right now it's all in 40% VRNOF and 60% MSOS. And if this is the bottom, I'm going to nail it and have a huge win. And if it's not, I'll have a small loss because my stop levels are clearly established. So that's my game plan. And that is how I'm trading this sector. It's only my highest risk, highest reward funds. And that accounts for probably less than 5% of my trading capital. Right around 5%. CURLF, nice daily equilibrium, tightening range where we've got our low, high of the bounce, double bottom, lower high, trying for another higher low. We're just getting real tight here. And the bulls must break $8 for a clear bull break. And that would be a daily trend change confirmed to the bulls. Right now we're in a clear daily downtrend still. We must get over these two resistance levels to confirm the daily trend change. If we do, we zoom out and tons of space for a weekly lower high. Look at this weekly EMA 12, this red line. Look at how many times we've rejected from this over the last 8 months. Rejection, 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 rejection. And next time we bounce, again, we can go another 10% from here and still be under that level. So we must get over that level for the bulls to prove anything. And again, weekly downtrend. First time we see a weekly trend change in this sector, it's going to be the first time since all-time highs. We're not close to that happening. Tons of work still needed. GTBIF is tight, Bulls must get over 1922 next week. Then we zoom out and scout a weekly lower high, anything under 2347. TCNNF, daily trend change today, but no follow through. Zoom out. Anything under 2744 is just a weekly lower high. We can go 20% next week and still be in a weekly downtrend. CRLBF is in a daily uptrend. Zoom out. Weekly resistance is in play, 736. So that would be notable. If CRLBF gets over 736, it's going to be the highest price that we've seen in the last 6 weeks. And that's notable. You want to put as many shorts underwater as possible. You want to say we're at the highest price in 6 months. That means anybody that is short from the last 6 months is underwater. So TCNNF, only people from the last week and a half are underwater right now that are short. But CRLBF is close to putting 6 weeks of shorts underwater. So it's a little bit of a different perspective when you look at that way. I'm speeding things up here because this video is taking way too long. I still have a lot that I wanted to say and skipped over. But psychedelic space, I'm in MNMD. I missed this bounce on news. I played the daily higher low. Why did I play the daily higher low? We double bottomed. I know I'm looking for a higher low compared to 79. We bottom at 90. The next day we bottom at 90. Boom, I'm in at 94, stop under 90. If that's the daily higher low, I've got a great entry. If it's not, I stop out with 5% loss, fully accepting that risk. It's the same exact trade that I just did on MSOS. And so it followed through and it went well. I sold half at 116 and I reloaded that half at 106, 10 cents cheaper. So I've got to break even now, probably around somewhere in the 80s, and I can just keep walking my stop up. I could use 103 now. 103 is a double bottom in the last 2 days. If this is going to break bull, we need to hold 103 and break 124 and 132 to confirm the daily trend change and the breakout from this equilibrium. Equilibriums come after volatility. We had 2 days of volatility, and this equilibrium is very likely to break next week. If it breaks down, I will exit at a win, small win, it'll be insignificant. If it breaks bullish, I will hold this position longer term. And we will just be looking for a weekly lower high if it breaks bullish. The only other names I'm watching in the sector are CMPS and ATAI. The reason being, everything else doesn't have enough volume for me to care. And the ETFs don't as well. And MSOS didn't have enough volume for me to care about it when we started out. And that volume ramped up. And this sector has to see that ramp up in volume in its ETFs if we're going to see any kind of sector strength. And you can see it was no volume, no volume. Okay, things are changing. 20-day average volume is now just in a steady uptrend. So CMPS and ATAI, they're in a daily downtrend still. And just like ACB and TLRY, they must break the high of this week next week to confirm the daily trend change as baby step number 1 to try and shift momentum. Then we zoom out and scout the weekly lower high. So that is where we stand bigger picture right now. Bulls have a ton of work to do. And again, I'm not holding my breath on any catalysts. I have to see price action that is affirming momentum shifting. And I'm watching the broader market very closely. I'm watching other growth names. This is a chart, ARKK divided by XLF. Look at the 4-month time frame. This is showing me 3-month. This is showing me a massive cycle shift. This is the COVID low. This is growth names, ARKK representing growth, XLF representing value. Huge rotation into growth. We top out 14 months, huge rotation into growth. 14 months now of huge rotation into value. Growth has been crushed. MJ has been crushed with it. And value's been going up. Energy sector, financial sector, they've been doing really well over the last year plus. So what I'm looking for is if we're going to set a fear low in the broader market and head back to all-time highs in the S&P 500, I'm watching to see if that's going to be a little bit of a catalyst for a shift back out of value into growth. I think the bulls, the market bulls, need a lot of convincing to think that that's safe. I don't think we're anywhere near seeing it, but it's something I'm watching for because I want that backdrop for the entire broader market if I'm going to have confidence in it impacting the cannabis high growth, high risk sector beneficially for the bulls. All right, lots more to talk about. We'll keep checking in on things. We're covering the sector every day with the chart guys here and the wonderful people holding down the boring chat room, which will eventually be a FOMO madhouse, but not anytime in the near future yet. Hope you have a great weekend. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.